G'day.
G'day.
How is going? Nothing is more damaging to our spiritual well-being than having casual sex without that deep communion of love. I would liken, as far as our spiritual well-being is concerned, casual sex is like drinking petrol. You know, it's that sort of degree of degradation and damage and toxicity, not just on the physical level but also emotionally. So suffer from no illusions there. However, you know, any disaster can become a blessing and any blessing can become a disaster. So it's important to keep that in perspective. I know Linda talked somewhat this morning about the glamour of important work. And nothing will cause you to define an identity which is less than who you truly are as a sovereign source entity than the glamour of important work. Feeling that you are better than, more important than, because you have important work to do. No one's better or worse than anyone else. People make different choices. Everyone is different. People make different choices, but no one's better than anyone else. And anyone that's truly in mastery will not view themselves in a way which compares, qualifies or quantifies as they will experience true equanimity and mutual joy and respect in all expressions of life. You have to remember that some of the choices that you're looking at making as far as being more mature as an evolving being and prioritising the ascending descension process as part of being self-determining in your own spiritual evolution, those choices that you are currently making, the struggle that you are having with confusing the spirit self with the egoic self, the temporal self, and energizing your ego, feeling justified in that and feeling self-righteous and so on. Even though you are making choices which for the bulk of humanity perhaps would be seen in the true light as considerable attainment, from the perspective of anyone that's a couple of steps ahead of you, you know, it's what you're going through is no less pathetic, in inverted commas, than someone struggling with drug and alcohol addiction, in living in the streets, stealing from their friends and causing an enormous amount of harm to those people that supposedly love them. So it's all relative. It's all points in perspective. And even the grandest spiritual masters that we can conceive of or know of, from a higher perspective, they are considered to be but children playing in the spiritual sandpit. It's ridiculous to sit in self-righteous condemnation and judgment of anyone. $100,000 years ago, the fellow in the tribe that went around and grabbed the good-looking girl by the hair and dragged her off into the cave and made her his woman was perhaps the most spiritually evolved member of that community. He gave her protection. He gave her security to raise her children, and probably loved her. So everything's relative. And it takes many, many different grades of perception and spiritual attainment and evolutionary attainment to make a world. If every person on this planet was at the same point in their spiritual process, in their evolutionary process, there would be no possibility for spiritual growth. There would be no possibility. Because the opportunities for service, to extend oneself, to love the unlovable, they would just not be there. So without this wondrous diversity, true spiritual growth is simply not possible. And for those who set their feet firmly upon the spiritual path, it is those perhaps younger souls that are struggling with issues that perhaps you have transcended and mastered, but are not so far behind you in your learning. It's those souls that are your master teachers that give you the opportunity to hone your skills in heart mastery, your ability to love and understand and transform and so forth. So it's important to maintain that tremendous sense of gratitude for all of the wondrous expressions of life. To not go into self-importance. Indeed, to not be on the egoic seesaw of superiority, inferiority. Or the ideological seesaw of spiritual superiority or inferiority. To be the saved, the chosen ones, or the damned, forgotten ones, you know, to vacillate between that. All of those sort of arbitrary dualities must be transcended. And certainly you must rise above them, to be in the world yet not of it. But it's not about any degree of self-righteous condemnation, or sitting in judgment, or feeling superior, or feeling important. Because that's not the qualities of someone that is truly integrated in their spiritual life. It's important to release dogmatic beliefs. Beliefs about the world being very black and white. So all these concepts of good, bad, good, evil, saved, damned, all of that has to go. Because it's not rooted in truth. Just like on the thermometer, there's nowhere which is a central point which says one extreme is hot and one extreme is cold. And they're like fixed points. And here we have hot and here we have cold. It's just a scale of degrees. What one person thinks is hot, another person might feel is quite cool. It's all completely subjective. It's all completely relative. Hot and cold are not opposites. They're simply different degrees on a scale. Everything is just different degrees on a scale. Fear is the same energy as love, but it's a lower vibration. You raise its vibration, it becomes love. It becomes conditional love. You raise its vibration, then it becomes unconditional love. Love and fear, they're not opposites. It's the same energy vibrating at a different rate. And at certain points in that scale, in that gradient, it certainly changes its state. Just like water, you lower its temperature, at a certain point it becomes ice. That's like fear. Conditional love's more like the water, and then the gaseous state, steam, is more like the unconditional love. So at certain points they do go through phase changes. But the water, it's still H2O, whether or not its condition is solid, liquid or gas. They're not opposites. Steam is not the opposite of ice. Water, not the opposite of steam. They're just differing degrees. So you have to experience the world and everything in it and all the expressions in it as energy, and it's all at different energy vibrating at different rates and different degrees of contamination and impurity, or purity, certainly, but not opposites. You've got to lose all the belief in the opposites on all levels. That's why the whole good, bad, good, evil, saved, damned, all that stuff has to go, because it's not rooted in truth. That's the world is flat stuff in spiritual terms. Everyone does know that it's a sphere, don't they? No one still thinks it's flat, do they? So you've got to stop thinking in those terms. You've got to stop polarising as though everything has an opposite. It apparently can have an opposite because of the limited lens perception, the limited lenses that we choose to use to perceive reality. But we need to move beyond those limited lenses and to understand reality in its true nature as this endless scale of vibrations. We also need to understand that just because our ability to perceive is limited to vibrations which start here, we can touch, and to up here that we can see, and everything in between with sound, instantaneous air pressure fluctuations, and we can detect particles floating in the air like farts, that's airborne poo particles that you're breathing. Doesn't mean that nothing exists above the level that we are able to perceive, or below the levels that we are able to perceive. And there are creatures, beings, entities coexisting in this space, in their own reality, in their own realm, which is just a scale of vibrations. We exist within a particular realm, scale of vibrations, so we can perceive. Some of us can perceive below the norm, and some of us can perceive above the norm. That's what high sense perception is. But there are whole worlds coexisting right here where we are, but we're not able to perceive them. And for the most part, they're not able to perceive our realm either, even though it's coexisting in the same space. Just like when you get a jar and you fill it with water and then you put food colouring in it and then you put sand in it. They're all occupying the same space. They're not in a separate space, they're all in the same space. And when it really comes down to it, human beings are parasites living on the surface of a rock hurtling through space, on the edge of a relatively young galaxy. An unimaginable distance from the centre of this relatively small universe. How seriously can you really take yourself? What a wonderful little rock that we live on, hurtling through space. Grateful for the opportunity to live, to experience life here. One of 10 million inhabited worlds in this sector of the universe alone. And you may feel that you're very intelligent, smarter, cleverer, more intelligent than the average person. But I assure you that there's a lot of beings on this planet that look at your struggle with the ego, saying one thing, doing something else, and you calling that being smart and intelligent. There's plenty of beings out there that sends chills down their spine when you call that intelligence. So it's important to be humble, to acknowledge where you're at, and be open to learning and integrating new knowing from this wealth of intelligence which exists, formed and formless, all around us. To be open but not completely. To allow the spirit self to create its own knowing. To be able to discern that which is unconditional love and above. And to assimilate that which is unconditional love and above. And to draw forth from that, from the living intelligence of that which is assimilated, to draw forth new knowing, which is then integrated and actualized as you become better at embracing the culture of love in every area of your life. And there can be no sacred cows. No thing is perfect. If it was perfect, it wouldn't be a thing. There's never been, nor will there ever be, a human being that walks upon this earth or any other world that exists in any type of absolute divine perfection. The concept is not only implausible, it is impossible. To exist in any degree of divine perfection, one must exist within a state which has not even aspected itself into beingness, let alone separate self-identity in any form. All these people out there that claim to be the only true this and the only true that, and I am the only true divine perfected embodiment of this, that or the other thing, that is all ego. Because as soon as you aspect or splinter yourself from Source in order to personify as anything, the very nature of that aspecting process means that you are less than the whole. As soon as you are less than the whole, you cannot be the complete divine anything. But in actual fact, if you're operating within any kind of time constraint, the nature of time, no matter how you're able to perceive it, even as the eternal now, you are not able to express all qualities of the potential of Source in one moment. It is impossible. If anyone ever did succeed in doing it, you would actually negate the tension which allows aspects of Source to separate out into separate streams of consciousness in order to be able to experience this type of reality. So the system, it would all implode on itself. It would reverse the Big Bang. It is not possible. And why would it be relevant anyway? No one is perfect. No one is the divine anything. Not in that absolute sense. You are able to connect with your own creative Source and to whatever degree express spirituality and divinity. Divinity is the quality of will, or the masculine aspect of Source. And spirituality, love, wisdom is the feminine aspect of Source, and you are able to embody that to some degree, but not as perfection. It's impossible. So it's important to have discernment. The danger of feeling marginalised, feeling set apart from, less than in any way, when you embrace the spiritual path and start to get some insight into what's possible within the realm of spiritual service, is that you start to feel, oh wow, I'm pretty good. I'm pretty great in a self-satisfied egoic way. But it's not about self-aggrandisement. It's not about the ego being great, feeling important. That's simply an indication of a lack of spiritual maturity. If you talk to any human being who's truly mastered self, and has become their own Source on the planet and to the planet. So they've formed their own connection with Source and has grounded to some degree, to some measure, grounded Source in human form. There is no sense of better than, more important than. They perceive wonder everywhere. And it's all wonderful. Yet within that there are still preferences.